I'm Chris Wairegi, New York-based cinematographer, local 600 camera operator, ASC mentee, and creator of 600 Black Women.
I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Art, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. And this is Season 2, Episode 3. My guest this week is cinematographer Chris Wairegi. Chris was born in Cleveland, Ohio, to parents who are both entrepreneurs, and she has an older brother. She was a keen student, enjoying art and history, as well as excelling at a number of sports. During high school, she developed an interest in photography and decided to pursue a film career. So she chose Rochester Institute of Technology, where she would be able to make films in her first year. She already knew that she was destined for the Big Apple, so armed with a dual degree to her credit, she made her way into the industry. Chris emphasizes the importance of starting at the bottom and learning different roles, which has helped her appreciate the multifaceted industry now that she is a cinematographer. Chris's film experience is cross-genre, from narrative to documentary, commercial to experimental, and short to long-form works for streaming, television, and the big screen. Her credits include Netflix's Survival of the Fittest, Starz's Run the World, Black Girl Beauty for VH1, and MTV's Women in Rap. In 2021, Chris founded 600 Black Women, whose mission is to create a more inclusive industry, and for which she was the recipient of the very first Kodak Vanguard Award. She is a member of the ICG Scholarship Committee, a 2021 ICG Generation Next Changemaker, and a 2023 ASC Vision Scholar. Chris lives in New York with her husband and her dog. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
And a happy new year. Now, tell me what 2024 looks like for you, and are you happy to have turned that corner?
I am thrilled to be in a new year, 2023. For anyone who is following the press around where the film industry has been, was a landmark year in terms of union negotiations. So my hope for 2024 is that it is a fantastic working market full of great scripts, new projects, and a lot of opportunities for all of us filmmakers.
Yes, I mean, it really did derail the industry for quite some time, a record time, I believe. And in terms of how it impacted you personally, Chris, were you able to do other projects during that time?
Yes, I was fortunate in that the union world did come to more or less a halt through the duration of the negotiations, but I was able to do some non-union work. I was fortunate to have some friends who had things that we could work on while still honoring all the strike protocols, and small projects that came my way, documentaries in the works, lots of spec work, things that we're hoping to pitch once everything is back online. So I was fortunate in that way.
Well, one of the other things you do is the 600 Black Women, which you founded, which I want to come to shortly. But I want to just bring us up to the present moment and what it looks like for you in 2024 in terms of new projects, maybe projects that have been waiting for you because of what happened in 2023. Give us an idea, give us a picture of what it looks like for you in the first few months of this year.
So towards the end of 2023, discussions sort of resumed about the upcoming projects, what it looks like down the road. So there are shows that were put on hold, additional seasons. I can't say too much specifically, but the idea would be picking up where we left off. So there should be a number of different shows coming back, new features, and just small projects, including documentary work.
Well, we know how you came to being on this show, and it's thanks to our friend Gretchen Warthen, who regards you very, very highly. She highly recommended that you came on the show, and she told me about what you'd done and that she was very impressed. She said it's pretty amazing what she's accomplished. That's Gretchen's words. Do you feel a sense of accomplishment at this point in what you've achieved and the industry recognition that you've been given for what you've achieved at this young age?
Well, I mean, first of all, I couldn't be more flattered to get any praise from someone like Gretchen. Gretchen is absolutely someone to model yourself after, and I couldn't be more grateful for her mentorship. Anyone who didn't get the opportunity to listen to her episode with you absolutely should. It was fantastic. To answer if I feel a sense of accomplishment, in some ways, absolutely. I've been able to help people. I've been told that the work that I do has changed people's lives, changed people's minds. And I think as a storyteller, that's the ultimate goal. I really couldn't ask to be more impactful than that. And then in the other way, there's so much work ahead. I have so many things I want to do. I don't think I'm halfway down the road. So I'm always sort of forward looking, but if I take the time to be reflective, really grateful that I've had the chance to do some of the things I have done and, hopefully be a positive force in the lives of other people.
Well, you're certainly doing that with your organization, which we'll come to shortly, but I want to backtrack. Let's rewind, Chris. Let's go back a little bit in time to where it all began for you. In Cleveland, Ohio, you have one brother.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if you could give us a picture of what the atmosphere was like growing up. What was life like for the young Chris Wairegi?
Oh, sure. So I had the pleasure of growing up in a working class town. I think Cleveland gets a very bad rap. I absolutely love Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. So my father's from Kenya, my mom's from Bermuda. They met in Toledo, Ohio. And I had the pleasure of growing up around a lot of first generation kids, a lot of immigrants, a lot of different kinds of people. Some of my closest friends when I was young was daughter of two Hindu parents who had an arranged marriage, daughter of Israeli parents who moved here. My neighbors were Nigerian. I just had a lot of diversity around, and it just felt very homey. And I think it's because places like Cleveland are someplace where if you're new to the US, you can make a very nice life for your family. So that's exactly what my parents did. They owned their own business. They worked at it tirelessly, 24/7, 365. My brother and I grew up in their office. We used to walk home from school and just sit there and take UPS packages and help my mom. And it was a really nice life. Everyone around us sort of was like family. So I was very fortunate to see a hard work ethic really young and just also learn to kind of take pride in the things that I manifest for myself. So I learned that from my parents. I had an amazing friend group. I'm fortunate to still be friends with a lot of those same people today in my adult years. I didn't have too many artists around, I think would be one of my only distinctions. I had amazing art teachers who were entirely influential. I probably would not have a film career were it not for them. But they were just public school teachers who really took an interest in the growth of their students and inspired me to be where I am today.
Well, we like to recognize the people that have made a difference in one's life. Who would they be from those young days, and when you were a student?
First, I had incredible writing teachers. I did a lot of creative writing very young. So that was always a thread, I'd say, from a very young age. I would draw with my cousin Vanessa. I'd say he's one of the only professional artists in my family, as well as my uncle Andy, who's a photographer. So he always encouraged me. And then in high school, the really big influencer for me was a teacher, Robert Coyne. We had a 35 millimeter darkroom photography class, and you just could not drag me out of there. Once I learned how to do it, I was absolutely addicted. He ran a CAD class. He ran our 35. I remember my dad's friend had an old Minolta beating around. So that was my very first camera, and then a Nikon. But learning darkroom photography in his class, I think was the first time I realized I could do this for a living. And he was probably the person who planted that seed. And then I was further inspired by a teacher, Mr. Jones, who taught this AV TV class. We had this ancient equipment, but he encouraged us to just make all these short films with our friends and have fun and be creative. We had to, produce, shoot, and edit all of our pieces. And similarly, he would just stay after school, and the state of teachers, I have no idea if they were paid for these hours. I'm sure they weren't, but they would let me stay in the lab in the edit suite, and I would just work on all these things and work out what did and didn't work. And it was the time that I realized going to college, when I started looking at colleges, that if I could do that, that's what I wanted to do.
So what was the earliest age then that you started handling a camera?
I probably first started handling cameras around 16 in the professional sense. I'm sure that I messed around before that, but the first time I handled cameras with real intention was probably around 16.
Before you discovered the camera, what were you doing to entertain yourself, and were you a good student?
Oh, I was a great student. I'm very much a bookworm. I was very big on oil painting as a kid. I never really did acrylic, but drawing, I did pottery. Anytime I could do something creative, I was. My mom even talks about when I was really little, my brother used to talk endlessly. She said she'd always know where he was because you could hear him. And for me, if she gave me a coloring book, that's where I would be. I would either be drawing or looking at something. So I guess I was always observing, always watching. And not that I didn't talk, because I did, but the idea, she said, that I was always watching, I was always looking at how things changed and moved. So I was a big reader. I loved study. I was an absolute history nerd. I definitely helped my friends with their homework. But arts were a passion. I just didn't realize arts could be a career. So I think that was the difference. But they're always part of my life in one way or another.
So visually then, what was giving you goosebumps when you looked out into the world?
Light. It's always been light. When I think about the kind of paintings I would imitate as a kid or try to capture, I even used to draw dresses, different fashion, but there was always something about how it caught the light in the design, the curves of something, the shadows of it. If it was a night sky, it's about the tungsten feel of a doorway against stars in the sky. So I found, whenever I was looking at something, that was what drew me. And that's what I really loved about doing black and white 35 photography, is it forces your eye to look at something in terms of its contrast and value, background, and make a lot of choices in the moment, not knowing exactly what it'll look like later. And then, reviewing your work, it teaches you to be more observant about the world around you.
This is a hard question, I know, given what you're doing now, Chris, but is there a favorite light?
A favorite light. So I would say right now, at least, one of my absolute favorite lights is if you have the pleasure of walking around Manhattan in the wintertime, there is a way that light bounces off the tall buildings, the glass buildings, and reflects back onto the sidewalk. It's very diffused by the time it makes it to the ground, but so bright and specular at the same time. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's so different from the shadow detail. If you have a windy day, the way people's coats move, just the look of it is absolutely gorgeous.
Do you feel a tug towards black and white whenever you get the chance?
That's a great question. I'm actually just prepping a project now that might be one of the first things I've shot in black and white for film in a long time. So I would say no. I mean, I do love color so much, and I think of the world in color, that I really struggle to surrender it. So I like it to be motivated in terms of actual motion, imaging projects. But in terms of still images, I love it. I think it helps focus on story. It helps you appreciate details that maybe would get lost, So I don't always feel a pull towards it, but I have an absolute love of it.
You say you were a good student and a very well-rounded student in terms of your interests. Where did sport come into play? Did it at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the great things about having an older brother is he plays a lot of sports. So I loved sports. I still am very active, very athletic. It helps in the field we're in to be fit. But I was really big on tennis. I played tennis for many years. I was state ranked. Played basketball, which I think is a great sport, especially for filmmakers, because you have to learn how to collaborate, anticipate what other people are doing. work as a team. I ran track and field. I ran cross country. I never got into soccer, but if there was something to play, I mean, I was very into playing it.
What sports did you play with your brother?
My brother? Oh, we just wrestled. we did play tennis too, but Monday Night Wrestling was the big event in our house. But we were big tennis players, so we were both what was called power players. We were very strong hitters. So it was really nice practicing against him because, him being older, bigger, and my brother's so much taller than me even now. It sort of forces you to rise to the occasion. So I think he always gave me that healthy sense of competition. So if there was something we could compete in, we always did.
Well, you mentioned there about physical fitness being important, obviously wielding a camera all day.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do now for core and upper body strength, Chris? And what would you recommend to other cinematographers for women trying to, keep up with the industry, standing there all day?
I've learned that core strength is essential to camera work. If you're a camera operator, you put so much weight on your shoulder and your back that you really have to balance it. So I focus a lot on lower body and core. It's very good to do arms too. But I find myself, at least right now, in a routine of doing core training daily. I do a ton of walking. I have a dog, so it's very easy to incorporate in my schedule. But I also run. I do a good amount of bike fitness, strength training. And I just try to make sure my whole body is strong and that I balance, the natural strength I have, the strength from a lot of training for many years, with the muscles I really need to work tip-top shape all the time at work. And then it's yoga. I mean, I really feel like you have to work through the inevitable pain that comes from holding a camera for as many hours as we do in our business.
Well, obviously that stands you in very good stead. We haven't transitioned to college and how you chose the school that you did. You went to the Rochester Institute of Technology.
That's right.
How did that decision come about, Chris? Talk about the process when you were graduating high school and deciding what you wanted to do.
So the tricky thing with art college is it's hard to know where to go. Every college is so different. And when I was looking at them and touring campuses and reviewing, I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. I heard so many different things from different students, graduates. Rochester Institute of Tech fell on my radar because I actually had a good number of friends who became engineers and they were looking at that school. And one of them told me, well, they have a film program that's founded by Kodak, And when I looked into RIT at that time, I think this might still be true. They were the only college in the country that let you make films in your first year. Most other schools dedicated the first year to study conversations around theory, reviewing the classics. And then in your second year, they'd let you start to make films. I really wanted to capitalize on all the time I had at university. So I wanted someplace that embraced that. They also did 16 millimeter video work. They had a photography program. They had a film program. They had an entire school within the school dedicated to it. And a number of things that were very unique at that time where a lot of schools were cutting back on their arts programs. They had the healthiest that I found. And, Rochester, I think, is an easy switch. It's another town I'd say is like a steel town or Rust Belt town like Cleveland. I wanted to be in New York State. I knew I was coming to New York City, so it was an easy transition, and that ended up being the pick.
Why did you know that you were destined for New York?
I just loved it. I don't know if it was TV I saw as a kid or books I read or women I modeled myself after, but I loved the idea of a town of weirdos and artists that moved quickly. I just was in love with it. Being that both my family are from overseas, east of the country, I think I always liked the East Coast too. Whenever we'd fly out of the country, we'd oftentimes stop in New York, and the size of it's so overwhelming. It's just something to fall in love with. So if I didn't go overseas, I knew I had to come here at some point. I just had to stop. Just being close to it, having the opportunity to visit on weekends was, another reason to just pick New York, pick someplace here, pick RIT.
So what were you watching in your early days? Do you remember the first films and TV that you were getting addicted to?
I remember that we had HBO at my house. We had this really ridiculous, I guess you'd call it a streaming package now. I mean, we had cable television, but I was watching Turner Classic Movies. I was watching foreign language films on HBO. We have this really wonderful independent theater in Ohio, in Cleveland called, oh my gosh, of course it's escaping my mind. That's so funny how things just evaporate while you're thinking about them. But we have this theater we used to go to. They'd have film festivals and they would just play movies from around the world. And a lot of them weren't in English or they were the weird indies. They didn't really play the mainstream ones, the movies you think of going to when you're visiting family for the holidays. And it just absolutely inspired me. So seeing all kinds of stories from different corners of the world, it was my favorite thing. You know, I would go with my parents, I'd go with my friends, and it just moved me that you could tell stories like that. I was a lot more into books when I was a kid, but when I discovered all of these kinds of films, I fell in love with it. It's a Cedar Lee theater, of course, now I remember.
Any favorites in those early days?
Oh, I have to think. I don't know what my first favorite would be. My taste has probably changed so much, but...
You remember the first film you saw in the cinema?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I remember Titanic really vividly. Oh, you know what one I remember too? It's not the first, but I think the big standout was The Matrix. I remember going to the movies, I think that was 1999, and seeing The Matrix, and I'd never seen anything like it. I just remember the feeling. The suspension of disbelief was just incredible. I'll never forget the moment he starts running up the wall sideways. And it just was such a wow factor. And I remember watching my dad watch it and my brother watch it and everyone else in the theater just clutching. You could just see people clutching the handles of the seat. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's incredible what people can do, the things people can think of, you know.
Do you remember then the phase that you went through when you weren't just watching a film, you weren't just watching a movie or TV or whatever, but you actually started looking at the technical detail and you were the nerd that sat there right through all and read all of the credits when everybody else was leaving the cinema?
First, I mean, I credit my mom too. She's one of the few people even to date that I know who sits through the entire credits. So I had some appreciation for there's hundreds of names. And when I was younger, it used to bother me. I mean, you have to sit there for a couple minutes at least for any film to get through all of the names and the roles. And you can't imagine what a gaffer is or a best boy.
Oh, at least, right?
Yeah, I mean.
With a big production, I mean, it could be 5 minutes.
Oh, my gosh. Endlessly and trying to catch a name or see where they shot and the brands attached to it. So I think I had an appreciation for film crews are not a small enterprise, and the production of a film is a larger form thing than, you know, the average viewer might know. But I don't think I really started analyzing them until I was in school. And I started thinking about why I liked the movies I liked and what made me return to some films again and again. I don't think I knew. I mean, again, it's so funny growing up where I did or being who I am. I mean, I'm a Black woman. I don't think anyone thought to tell me you can be an artist. Nobody told me that you couldn't, but it wasn't the career path I think people assumed for me. So it was something I really loved and I looked at, but I didn't look critically because I just didn't think I was going to be a part of it. I just thought it was something for other people. I didn't think it was for me.
So you didn't have any role models then?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I had a lot of people who encouraged me. I had people I wanted to be like, but I mean, if you had asked me when I was 16 what I thought I was going to do, or maybe I should say 15, I thought I was going to be a marine biologist or a veterinarian. I kind of sought after careers that I saw myself in. So, you know, at that age, I was just limited in my thinking to only doing things that I could see someone else who looked like me doing. So I didn't mentally reach for something that I thought just wasn't accessible to me. I didn't learn to do that until a little later. So that was the big leap, making the choice to study it and just kind of say, okay, well, I'm just going to give this my absolute best shot because it's the thing I love most. And hopefully it works out.
So you fast forward to today, then you have become that woman that other women are saying, if you can see her, you can be her.
Yes. I mean, I'd hope so. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I feel so positive to have a space like 600 Black women that shows people who look like me to people who might not do it otherwise. I do think, as corny as it is, I think representation matters. I think seeing women in spaces matter. I think seeing people of color in different spaces matter. And I do think, whether we realize it or not, kids are looking at the world, young adults, and they're deciding places that they can work, can live, people they can be. And I think if we don't show them all the things that they can be, I mean, we might miss out on some really fantastic role models in the future.
So graduating from college then was the point where you were looking for doors that you could open or were already open for you?
Oh, absolutely.
And where did they lead to?
So I was lucky. I came out of school with a job in New York City. The film program we had did a weekend in New York. And one of the places we visited in that weekend was a rental house. So I pestered endlessly the guys who were working there. I grilled them with so many questions that they actually remembered me by the time they applied. And they were willing to take on a student. So I found an apartment the size of a closet at the end of a train that I could afford. And I had a job when I left school and came to New York. So I was really lucky in that regard. But being able to work at a rental house let me learn a lot of gear that we didn't have at school. We had a good amount of gear, I think a lot more than other colleges. But of course, in the workforce, everything's always changing. I mean, cameras change even quicker now. Technology, lenses, there's always new things. So working there really gave me that inside look at the kinds of equipment I'd be looking at working with on set. And it was a nice way to just meet other filmmakers in New York and kind of get my footing and figure out how to pay rent instead of going freelance immediately.
So you didn't feel any biases towards gender or racial prejudices at all at that time, Chris? You didn't have to kick those doors down. It seems like, the world was open to you.
I wish I could say that at any point in my life I didn't feel it, but I don't think there's been one where I haven't. So I was lucky in that I was hired, I was supported, I had friends, I had coworkers. But at different points in my career, I've always had people who seem to assume that I'm not ready to work hard somehow. And I couldn't put my finger on the why. So you'd have to ask them why that is. Maybe people look at me and assume I'm lazy. I'm not sure what it is, but I was accustomed to working hard. I finished 5 years in college with 2 degrees. I wasn't scared to work hard. So I'm not afraid to combat the idea someone might have, but I certainly met it then, and I continued to encounter it through my career.
So what were the degrees that you had in your pocket then when you graduated?
I was the first person, actually. One of my old professors told me recently that I guess I'm still the only one, but I graduated with the only dual degree at that time in film production with a focus on cinematography and a degree in advertising photography. So my thought was that I was going to bounce back and forth between the photo world and the film world. I did an internship before I graduated with a photography company. And I thought, okay, well, if I can't make the inroads that I need in film, I can always do photo, and I have that to fall back on. So I had both of those degrees when I graduated and started working.
And what were the first projects then the first films that you were producing then in those early days? Anything people would have me on set to do. I was applying to every little PA position I could find online. I learned quickly no one's just going to, even though I'd studied camera, no one was just going to hire someone they didn't know to shoot for them or, maybe be an operator in their world. So I just started from the bottom, and I worked as a production assistant, and I'm really grateful that I had to start there because it really makes you appreciate what every person on set is doing. It makes you appreciate each person's contribution. I think it's kind of like the equivalent of if you ever worked a server job, you probably end up in life being a little kinder to the person making your coffee than someone who hasn't been in, the other side of that. So I worked my way up from PA work. I did tons of commercials. I did features. I just did anything and everything people would have me on until I finally had someone who started hiring me to camera assist for them. And so what was making your heart beat faster in terms of the genres you were looking at and working on at that point? Did it give you a light to follow, so to speak, a pathway, thinking that's where I want to go?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think part was the gear. Every time, I mean, I still feel excitement when I see someone with a camera slung over their shoulder. When I see the giant lights parked outside of a window and, hear an AD locking up a set. I mean, the whole thing is just intoxicating. For me, I think it was walking around the city, seeing shoots happen. You see all the Haddad trailers, the crafty tables. But it's so exciting. You see someone with a walkie on their belt, the camera cart. I just was inspired all the time. Just being near the action, seeing people doing the thing they love always just inspires me. And then, if you're lucky enough, and at that time in my career, of course, they don't have PAs that close to the actual action. You get to see the scene unfold, see how they're covering it, see the angles, listen to people having conversations and, trying to make your day and fighting all the suns going down. I mean, the whole thing is just so wonderful. Even overnights. I mean, I did overnights in blistering cold and I was just so thrilled to be there. So I still have some of that excitement of, even reflecting after last year. I think it really makes you contemplate. If you love it, I think it's like New York. If you really love it, you're willing to do those 14-hour days, those 16-hour days. It might not be sexy all the time, but it's just so exciting to be able to do something that we love. It's a real privilege.
And as you've come up through your career then and progressed to where you are now, with that comes pressure. How do you handle that? Do you enjoy it?
Enjoy it? Maybe not. But frankly, I think I work better under pressure. I think I'm accustomed to it. I think when things feel too easy, it's almost harder to be creative. I think it forces you when you are limited and the means you have or the amount of time or the size of crew or the opportunities, it really makes you work harder and focus. It also maybe sometimes doesn't allow too much room to second guess yourself. Is you just have to go. You have to do it and get it done. So I think the pressure has probably pushed me. If I were comfortable and everything came easily, I probably wouldn't have the level of gratitude I do. And I probably, in some rights, wouldn't be as successful as I've been in some of the things I've tried. So I think the pressure makes me work harder. And that's been a big reward for me in my life.
Well, we all know that the film industry has been a very male-dominated world, which you're trying to put right. And we'll talk about that in a second, because I'm wondering when you were coming through, and if it is the case now, that you felt somewhat intimidated when you got on set.
No, I didn't feel intimidated. And it's so funny. You think of the things that you get used to is I just expected it to be men when I showed up to work. I could work, job after job after job and not see another woman on set. When I first started, they were so rare. And everyone was surprised when I would show up that I was a woman. And then I'm a Black woman to boot. So I don't know which one's more shocking for people. But I just expected it. I expected to be surrounded by men all day. I was accustomed to being the only woman. I guess I was aware of it before I came into film, but it just became a reality and a truth of the thing. And I've been very lucky to see that change. I've been lucky to now have, women colleagues and see women in positions of power, but it just wasn't common.
When you come into the industry, you have to develop your own confidence in your work environment.
Oh, sure.
And grow your own empowerment, if you will. It's not handed to you. Do you feel when you walk on a set then that you can own it in a way that, I am a woman, I am a Black woman, I have earned my right to be here and no one can take that from me. And I want to be a role model for other women to see that they can achieve this. Do you feel that secure and strong now when you walk onto a set?
It sounds so good when you describe it. I wish that was exactly how my inner monologue sounded. And there's always kind of the, first day school nerves, I think. I don't think it's necessarily always to do with what I look like, but I think the advantage, for instance, of presenting femme and being Black is I really can't hide them. So I can't control it. So people are going to know this about me. You know, there's so many video calls before jobs now too. I remember when I first started out, you never had video calls. So maybe someone would speak to you on the phone or they'd email you, but they might not know my gender. They might not know my color until I got there. So maybe that was a little anxiety producing, or anxiety producing to do it in advance. I don't know, but absolutely, it's in the back of my mind that I am prepared to work to show someone who I am every single time I walk onto a set. So, you know, I don't want someone thinking I'm the person who's going to be sitting down or on their phone or phoning it in or letting someone else carry the brunt of the work while I watch. I absolutely show up to every set intent on making sure people understand that I'm someone who worked hard to be where I'm at. I have every intention of maintaining that work ethic, and also the team that I like to surround myself with, the people I like to work with and collaborate with, hopefully are of the same ilk. It matters a lot to me to have creativity and professionalism, reliability, really solid people around you, and to kind of have that reputation. So I do try to work where I can stand on those laurels, and I have that preceding me. You know, in film, it's such a business of who you know in some ways. So a lot of times someone is recommending me to people. So hopefully I come with, you know, certain expectations that are positive, and then I get to fulfill those. But I'm highly aware if, you know, I'm on a job and there's a PA who's a girl, who's new, someone who just graduated school, that hopefully they're seeing that they can be wherever they want to be because they see me in the spot that I am.
Well, your bio reads, Chris, a titan in her field and an irreplaceable asset on each project, which leads me very nicely to what you did a year ago by founding the 600 Black Women. And I just want to read the mission so people have a clear understanding of what you're intending to do and the impact that you're planning to have in the film industry for Black women. Our mission is to create a more inclusive industry. We are dedicated to assisting the next wave of not only Black women identifying filmmakers, but creative voices, and especially women, gender non-conforming, queer, immigrant, and BIPOC voices. For the people who dictate the look, feel, texture, focus, marketing, still, and moving images that so many of us attach emotion to. That is a wonderful goal, you know, to put your arms around all of that, Chris. Where did that catalyst for that come from?
From having to walk around in my skin, honestly. There's, I think, just so much expectation. People see you, you know, film is so much a white male dominated space. And we're now in a place of actually telling stories that center around women, telling stories that center around Black people, different kinds of people. And I feel like there should be some ownership of those stories. There should be some idea about who tells them, how we're telling them. We've had conversations about who's in front of the camera, but I think we need to have more about who's behind it. I see it every day. I walk onto set and I feel it. And a lot of times I'm representing a group of people who are in abundance. If you walk outside your set in New York City, it certainly does not look like your average show on cable television. It looks like New York. And I just feel that our sets, you know, when we're working in Atlanta, when we're working in Los Angeles, New York City, they should reflect that world and they should reflect those people. So it's kind of an easy thing for me because I feel like I am that person. The thing I love about cinema is its ability to tell so many stories, put you in so many shoes. I would never sit down to watch a story that is just my own. You know, when I think about the kinds of books I read, the kinds of books most people read, the idea of transporting you, putting you in someone else's shoes. So I think we have an opportunity to do that. I think we have an opportunity to learn about more kinds of people, tell new stories, different stories. And I think one of the simplest ways to achieve that is empowering people with the ability to do so.
Now, it was Christian that told me the impact that you've had with this organization, but how you've doubled your number in terms of membership. You started this in 2022.
21, actually. Yeah.
Did you start this single-handedly, or did you form a pool of women and a committee, so to speak?
I wish I had the foresight. No, it was an accident. I mean, so the story went, I was able to join the union in 2020, and I had some very interesting experiences on union sets that I just had not had in the non-union space. And I was very curious how much of the experience that I had was centered around me being a Black woman, and how much was maybe, for some reason, again, maybe someone just doesn't like my face. I don't know. But I was told by a Black woman I knew in the union that they thought I was the 6th woman operator that they'd heard of. So she congratulated me kind of comedically. And I thought for the longest time it was a joke. And I kept showing up on union sets, and I mean, people would stop. You would think there was an elephant that walked into the room, and it was all different kinds of people. No one meant any harm by it, but every single person, as if they were possessed, would say, "I've never seen a Black camerawoman." I mean, I wish I could montage every single time that someone said it to me. Everybody would assume I was, HMU or locations or AD, something, but not camera, never camera. It was just staggering. And these are people who've been doing it for 40 years, 30, 50 years. They've been working forever. And they said, I've never seen one Black woman in the camera department. And anyone who's familiar knows the camera department is comprised usually of, it's no less than like 6 people on a small union job. Oftentimes it's pushing closer to like a dozen. So if you think the span of someone with a 40-year career who does shows that might be 3 to 9 months and has a group of 12 people, has never seen a Black, it boggles the mind, right? So I basically started looking. And at that time I discovered, in fact, in the Eastern region, there's only one other Black woman in the entire Eastern region of our union. And our union's divided into, Central, Western, and Eastern region. But I was one of 2. So I decided to email all these people and just say, hey, I'm, Chris Wairegi. Curious if any of you want to meet and just kind of talk. And at that time, I found 22 people. I knew a couple of them. I had to hunt for names. I was asking around. Today we're 99, which is so exciting. But it just started with an email. I was hoping people might want to get a coffee or a drink or just have a little chat. I wasn't sure what would happen, but the whole thing just exploded. But that's where it started.
Do you feel now that this is going to be the organization that will give Black women a leg up, so to speak, in the industry?
I certainly would hope so. I mean, we're very focused on the union space and specifically camera and publicity, of course, but we mentor any Black women or gender nonconforming people who find us. So we try to sort of make sure people see us and see that they can be us and demystify the process. Not everyone knows how to join, what it takes to join, or they feel they can't because they don't have a network of people or support. So we try to kind of smooth that transition, educate people, support them, and make a safe space. I think also with women, sometimes we're very afraid to even attempt something for fear of doing it wrong or looking stupid, being judged. I think we have to be like PhDs at the thing before we even start doing it. And we try to sort of make it okay to try and fail, to make room for them. But I would hope that there's a host, frankly. 600 Black women exist because I think there's been a lack and a failure for too long in film, but in a lot of spaces for a lot of different kinds of people who should have support. I just think we would have a lot more different kinds of people in different spaces if there was a pathway forward. So I'm happy to be doing the work, but I also have the expectation and I challenge other people to be doing it too. I don't think it should just be us alone making the way. I think it should be a collective mission that we're all participating in.
How do people join this, Chris, if they're listening to the show and they're interested in the work that you're doing? They can find you at 600blackwomen.com. That's 600
That's
numerical,
right.
600blackwomen.com. How do they approach this? Is there some form of qualification or to membership?
Yes. So we asked people go through our website. You can use the contact form. You can email us at 600blackwomen@gmail.com. And then you're onboarded. So because our resources are limited, we are mentoring Black women and gender nonconforming folks. And that's how you can access our resources. We do partner with the IATSE Latinx Caucus, also the Local 600 Queer Group, among others. So if you're looking for a specific space and it's not ours, then we also try to direct folks to the existing resources that are there. that's how you reach out. Just go to our website, 600blackwomen.com, and send us a message.
And what do you hope this looks like in, say, 5-10 years' time, Chris?
In 5-10 years' time, I hope we represent, I would say, at least 7% of the IATSE membership. I would like our numbers within the union to look like our numbers in the country. So my hope is that we grow our membership, that we empower the people who are a part of it. And I would love if we were known as incredibly disciplined, professional, talented people to have in your team. That's the long goal. Is I don't want people to be afraid of hiring Black women or people or women. I want them to be confident that we've worked very hard to be where we are and have no reservations about adding a new person to your team.
Well, speaking of milestones, let's go back to your personal milestones. How would you identify those? What are the milestones in your life?
Oh, in my life or in my career?
Both.
Oh, man. I mean, I just have a lot of gratitude to have come this far. So I think one of the ones in my life that I love most is I've had the opportunity to travel and see so much of the world professionally and personally. And it's just been incredible. I could never get enough of it. When I met Gretchen, actually, we were on a shoot that took us to Paris and Tokyo. And we were there for a month in each city. And it was phenomenal to live there and learn from our local crew and, see a place in a way that I wouldn't usually as a tourist. So I've been privileged to travel a great deal. I also feel privileged to be able to bring to life a mission like the 600 Black Women. Most recently, I guess, in my professional career, I was stunned to learn that I was chosen as an American Society of Cinematographers mentee and scholar for 2023 through 2024. When I was in school, I was a recipient of a Kodak scholarship. My work has played in different museums and festivals around the world. I've just had a lot of opportunities to feel celebrated and to feel grateful. And, it's bolstered my resolve to sort of get to those long-term goals.
How about the productions that you've worked on? Any that, are so particularly memorable that come to mind and you like to share?
Well, the show that I loved working on before the strike, that's funny, I'm merging them in my mind now, is the show on Netflix that everyone should watch called Survival of the Thickest, starring Michelle Buteau, written by Michelle Buteau. And it was an absolutely fantastic project to work on. I met so many people I hope to work with again. And the stories were wonderful. I had the pleasure of being a part of the P-Valley set. I've shot a number of features at this point in my career that I'm very proud of. One about the great artist David Hammons called The Melt. And I've done a number of shorts that are finished now and doing the festival circuit that I'm so excited for people to see. So some of the standouts are those. And then some of them are, some of the smaller things I've done. Did a show called Trans Youth Town Hall for VH1 that won GLAAD Awards and was incredible. Did Black Girl Beauty for VH1. I did a piece for MTV featuring female rappers. So I have a lot to be grateful for, but it travels the gamut, all the different projects that I love that I've been able to do.
And, there's always the bloopers, Chris, and sometimes they're not funny at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight, do you ever look back and at some very funny moments?
Oh, yeah. One of the things that's fascinating about doing a profession like ours, which I really think of as like a trade, is that you're learning while you work in most of your career. I mean, I've heard people say who are at the top of their game, kind of the end of the road in terms of knowledge and prestige, that they're still learning. So it can be messy. You are often working in a team of people. You've got to be accountable for your own mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes. I can think back to a good number that I've made, and I've been really lucky to sometimes make those mistakes, oftentimes really, in the company of people who are like, me too. I've also done this. I've also done that. I remember I mean, I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but it's a big deal to break something in the camera department. You are familiar with how expensive the gear is, so it matters to be delicate. I remember I was working with this one director, cinematographer. I love Kate Phelan. You get the chance to check out her work. And Kate was holding the camera and we were rushing. We were losing daylight. I was assisting her. This is when I was an assistant. And she had this clip-on matte box and I had to pop it off really quick and drop in a beauty filter. And we had to go. And rather than putting the camera down, I didn't have the knowledge at that point in my career of, ways to remedy this that I absolutely would now. But I remember she was holding the camera and I tried to pop off the matte box with the filter in the other hand and naturally dropped the filter and it shattered into just a million pieces. It was like a comedy sketch. And Kate just looked at me and she said, all right, we got to go. And we just shot it with, I don't remember if we had a different intensity of that filter that we ended up using or if we went without. But she hired me for years after. I still get lunch with Kate. And she came up an electric. She's worked as a DP. She's now a director. She had her growing pains too. And she just understood, no one wants to ever make mistakes. We all want to be perfect all the time. And we hope no one, if we're going to make them, hopefully it's in the privacy of our own head. But on a film set, it's really rare you're granted that luxury. You're usually going to make them publicly or someone's going to see it. So I remember her just having a good attitude about it. We talked about it, but, we made the day and it wasn't a whole shouting match and how could you do this or that. I think that was the job I met her on too. And then she mentored me. I can laugh about those things now, but yeah, it also gives me grace now when I'm working with my assistants and, people will make mistakes. We work long hours. It's a hard job and everything is precious. So there's room to be kind. I try to always make sure it's there because people were absolutely kind to me.
Everything and everyone is precious.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What is the most fulfilling way then for you to spend a day professionally, Chris?
The best day that I ever get in my career is a day where I'm telling a story that I find meaning in. It's meaningful. I get a good script or a good doc. And I'm sitting there watching and thinking, oh, wow, I'm loving the performance or hearing someone share a story that I can't wait to share with somebody else. I have a crew that reflects my values and my work ethic. There's hopefully great people there on the set with me. And lastly, I get the opportunity to be creative, to add my 2 cents to it. I like working a lot with directors who are collaborative, who have a vision, but trust you and they're open to suggestion. You can always kind of add something to make it even better. So that's a wonderful day if I get those 3 things.
And on a personal level, we know you have a husband. You also have a dog, which you enjoy spending time with. So what's your favorite way to spend a day when you're not at work?
Ooh, favorite way to spend a day. It's going to the gym. It's going for a walk. It's visiting the botanical garden. It's having delicious food. I mean, one of the great things about New York City is there's never a shortage of things to do and there's never a shortage of things to eat. So if I can have a day that I get to do anything I want, it's just enjoying all things outside. So I'm going to make sure I get some arts and culture and some food and the luxury of just leisure as well. I mean, we enjoy a nice life, so I like enjoying it.
And you mentioned how much you enjoyed reading when you were younger.
Oh, yes.
I'm wondering what's on your bookshelf. What's on your nightstand right now?
Right now I'm reading Pineapple Express. I also have some camera books that are less sexy, highly technical books that I'm reading. But, Pineapple Express, Pineapple Street. I'm reading Pineapple Street, which is a great little book about Brooklyn Heights, if you're familiar with that neighborhood in New York. So that's been a pleasure reading. It's a fiction book that's been really fun. It actually kept me up late last night. I didn't get as much sleep as I should have.
That's always a good book that does that to you.
Exactly. You can't put it down. You're like, okay, I'll just one more chapter and then I'm going to go to bed. So,
what are you looking forward to seeing in the movie theaters now?
Oh, Ava DuVernay's new film Origin. I keep hearing about, and I couldn't. Yeah, I'm so excited. There's a lot of lore around this film so far, and I can't wait to see it. Just the way she went about funding it, the story that she's telling, how she shot it. hugely of interest to me. And then the other one is American fiction, which I've heard great things about. And just the trailer alone made me crack up and laugh. So very much looking forward to catching both of those.
Humor is important. And I hope you bring that to the set as well. It's not all work. You've got to have fun, right?
Always. Absolutely. Why do it? Why else do it if you're not going to enjoy it?
Exactly. Chris, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for coming on the show and being my guest this week.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And if you scroll down the show notes, you'll find a link to Chris's social media, her website, and her IMDb profile. And if you're on Instagram, please do give us a follow at the Art Podcast. That's Art with 2 A's. We're also on Facebook. Just look for Art, the podcast. That's where you can, of course, leave your comments, questions, suggestions for guests. We always love to hear from you. So if not on social media, then you can also drop us a line to hollowellstudios@gmail.com. And coming up on the show this month, I'll be talking to the sculptor Jana Butner and the illustrator Julie Bankert. We'll also be talking to film and TV set decorators, makeup artists, and some surprises as we explore the world of visual arts. So I'll be back next week with another guest, and I hope you'll join me then.